Hello, my name is Gary, and I was raised in the Western United States, so I'm a native English speaker. I hope that you will enjoy this YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us.
The Tale of Benjamin Bunny by Beatrix Potter, 1866 to 1943. One morning a little rabbit sat on a grassy bank. He perked up his ears, listening to the trit-trot of a pony. A small carriage was coming down the road, driven by Mr. McGregor, with Mrs. McGregor sitting beside him in her best bonnet. As soon as they passed, little Benjamin Bunny hopped down onto the road and set off, skipping and jumping, to visit his relatives who lived in the woods behind Mr. McGregor's garden. The woods were full of rabbit holes, and in the neatest, sandiest one lived Benjamin's aunt and his cousins, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. Old Mrs. Rabbit was a widow who made a living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffetees. I once bought a pair at a bazaar. She also sold herbs, rosemary tea, and rabbit tobacco, which is what we call lavender. Little Benjamin wasn't really eager to visit his aunt. He came around the back of the fir tree and almost bumped into his cousin Peter. Peter was sitting alone. He looked unwell and was wrapped in a red cotton handkerchief. "Peter," whispered little Benjamin, "where are your clothes?" Peter replied, "The scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden," and went on to explain how he had been chased around the garden and lost his shoes and coat. Little Benjamin sat down next to his cousin and reassured him that Mr. McGregor had gone out in a carriage, and Mrs. McGregor had too, definitely for the day, since she was wearing her best bonnet. Peter said he hoped it would rain. Just then they heard old Mrs. Rabbit's voice from inside the rabbit hole, calling, "Cottontail, Cottontail, bring some more chamomile." Peter mentioned that he might feel better if he went for a walk. They walked away hand in hand and climbed onto the flat top of the wall at the edge of the woods. From there they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and shoes were clearly visible on the scarecrow topped with one of Mr. McGregor's old hat. "Crawling under a gate ruins your clothes. The right way to get in is by climbing down a pear tree." Peter fell head first, but it didn't matter since the soil below had just been raked and was soft. It had been planted with lettuce. They left a lot of tiny footprints all over the garden bed, especially little Benjamin, who was wearing clogs. Little Benjamin said the first thing they needed to do was get Peter's clothes back so they could use the pocket handkerchief. They took the clothes off the scarecrow. It had rained overnight, the shoes were filled with water, and the coat had shrunk a bit. Benjamin tried on the hat, but it was too big for him. Then he suggested they fill the handkerchief with onions as a small gift for his aunt. Peter didn't seem to be enjoying himself. He kept hearing noises. Benjamin, on the other hand, felt completely at ease and ate a lettuce leaf. He mentioned that he and his father often came to the garden to gather lettuces for their Sunday dinner. Little Benjamin's father was known as Old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. The lettuces were indeed very impressive. Peter didn't eat anything. He said he wanted to go home. Soon after, he dropped half of the onions. Little Benjamin said they couldn't climb back up the pear tree with a load of vegetables. He confidently led the way to the other end of the garden. They walked along a narrow path on wooden planks under a sunny brick wall. The mice sat on their doorsteps, cracking cherry stones, and winked at Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin Bunny. Before long, Peter let go of the handkerchief again. They found themselves among flower pots, frames, and tubs. Peter heard even more alarming noises, and his eyes grew as wide as lollipops. He was a step or two ahead of his cousins when he suddenly stopped. This is what those little rabbits saw around the corner. Benjamin took one quick look, and in no time at all hid himself, Peter and the onions, under a large basket. The cat got up, stretched, and came over to sniff the basket. Maybe she liked the smell of onions. Either way, she sat right on top of the basket. She sat there for 5 hours. I can't show you what Peter and Benjamin looked like under the basket because it was too dark, and the smell of onions was awful. It made both Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin cry. The sun moved behind the trees, and it was already late in the afternoon, but the cat still stayed on the basket. After a while, there was a soft pitter-patter, and some bits of mortar fell from the wall above. The cat looked up and saw old Mr. Benjamin Bunny strutting along the top of the wall on the upper terrace. He was smoking a pipe filled with rabbit tobacco and had a small stick in his hand. He was searching for his son. Old Mr. Bunny didn't think much of cats. He leapt off the top of the wall and landed right on the cat, swatting it off the basket and kicking it into the greenhouse, leaving behind a handful of fur. The cat was too shocked to fight back. When old Mr. Bunny chased the cat into the greenhouse and locked the door, he returned to the basket. He grabbed his son Benjamin by the ears and whipped him with a little switch. Then he pulled out his nephew Peter. Then he grabbed the handkerchief full of onions and marched out of the garden. When Mr. McGregor came back half an hour later, he noticed a few things that puzzled him. It seemed like someone had been walking all over the garden in clogs, but the footprints were ridiculously small. He also couldn't figure out how the cat had managed to lock herself inside the greenhouse with the door shut from the outside. When Peter got home, his mother forgave him, relieved that he had found his shoes and coat. Peter and Cottontail folded up the pocket handkerchief, while old Miss Rabbit strung up the onions and hung them from the kitchen ceiling alongside the herbs and rabbit tobacco.